Hey guys, what's up? Weeknd here, bringing you the third episode of Camille matchup series. Today's matchup is Fiora, a champion that a lot of you has been asking for. This is a matchup that I personally used to struggle with as well. However, once you learn the matchup, I think this matchup boils down to a skill matchup rather than a hard counter, with either side having the potential to win it. Starting with runes, this is the page that I would suggest. The sorcery tree is pretty self-explanatory. It will offer you a lot of poke against Fiora to push her out of lane. For the second tree, I recommend Inspiration mainly due to the perfect timing rune. Fiora matchup is a very snowballing matchup that can be determined by one all-in, and having that free stopwatch post 6 minutes is very useful in an all-in scenario to deny Fiora's ultimate procs or a dive from an enemy jungler. As for starting items, I would suggest a Doran Shield and a Potion. On your first back, if you can afford it, I definitely recommend a Sheen. Fiora is a rather squishy champion, and if you can get a couple Sheen procs into her, you can pressure her into a solo kill or a bad back timing. If your lane is going very well, you can opt into rushing a Triforce, which will give you the most dueling potential against her. And after that, you'll be finishing up your tabbies. Say the lane wasn't going too well and you weren't confident enough to 1v1 her, I would suggest going a Tiamat before finishing a Triforce, just so that you could farm out and look for roams, as your roams are much more potent than Fiora's. And this is where the playstyle tends to differ a little bit. Personally, I love to build a Ravenous Hydra against Fiora, just kind of fight fire with fire. I don't really like going tanky build, the Sterix build against Fiora, just because the fact that Fiora does do percent health max damage, and just because of that fact, I love to go more damage and try to solo kill her and try to snowball against her. And with this build, you're going to be rounding it out with a GA. This is very good for split pushing, especially against Fiora, and getting a Sterix after that. However, say my laning phase did not go very well and I was pretty behind of the Fiora and I wasn't confident enough to 1v1 her. In that case, I would opt in for the Sterix build, which is more teamfight oriented. It's a lot more tanky, a lot less diveable by the Fiora. This will be most likely be finished off with a Titanic Hydra with a Thornmail to round it out. And with this build, it'll be very hard for the Fiora to be able to 1v1 dive you. As for the skill order, maxing Q is definitely the way to go in my opinion. With the Q max, Fiora will be left with a tough choice to either parry your second Q or your E, and you can punish her accordingly. If she does decide to parry your second Q, that means you are free to use your E to stun her without having to worry about getting your E parried and stunned. And if she doesn't choose to parry your second Q, that means she'll be taking a chunk of true damage and you'll most likely be winning that trade. Not to mention the movement speed that you get from leveling up your Q is also very helpful against Fiora, because the 1v1s against Fiora usually ends up in a battle of movement speed and kiting her out. However, you must be very careful of using E with the playstyle, because it'll have a very long cooldown until you get to max a second. So you only want to use your E in a trade if you know for sure if the enemy jungler is not near top. Now moving on to the gameplay section, this was a game that I played against a Fiora on my Master Smurf, so it is against a Master top player. Level 1, you're going to want to take W, and I will briefly show you how to trade level 1. You never want to use your W against a Fiora until she uses her Q. Now you'll see me have a bad Vital against the Fiora, but I'll purposely bait her into using her Q right here. And once she does use her Q, she has no more dashes left, and you can use that W freely and get a free Arcane Comet with a Scorch hit on her to her. So that's why you never want to use your W until Fiora uses her Q. So you see me again right here, I have a bad Vital, but I'm just baiting for this Fiora to come in. She actually misses the Vital, and since she used her Q, I will punish her accordingly. So now she's very low. I'm looking to get that level 2 off of that melee creep that I just killed. She's still level 1, she doesn't have her parry. I go for a Knight C, and I get double autos off, and she's pretty chunked at this point. She has her corrupting pots running, but either way, she's taking very heavy trades that is resulting in a very bad trade for her. And now I'm still looking to just poke her out, land another W, and This lane is all about poke, poke, poke early on. Fiora doesn't really have the sustain early on before she gets her Ravenous Hydra. So right here, she uses her parry in a pretty bad fashion. I know that her parry's down for another 15 seconds or so. The enemy jungler was Sejuani in this game, and I know that Sejuani's don't really clear the camps that fast early game. So right here, once I hit this W, I know it's go time. So I land that Q onto the creep. She flashes out, but I know she was looking to flash out, so I just flash right after her. I have my second Q ready, and I get the second Q out. So as you can see, this matchup is definitely a skill matchup, and I think that in Season 8, with the addition of the Sorcery Tree and Arcane Comet, this matchup is actually a lot easier for Camille compared to Season 7. In Season 7, both Fiora and Camille ran the pretty much same masteries. They ran Fervor, and Fervor was a mastery keystone pretty much designed for extended trades, whereas Comet is much well suited at short, pokey, bursty trades, and those are the trades that Camille actually excels at. Whereas Fiora loves to take the long, extended trades where she gets multiple vital procs on you and tries to all-in you. So right here, she uses her parry. I didn't quite land my E, but again, I have such a big item advantage and XP lead over her. Doesn't really matter. And at this point, I'm just looking to poke her down every time she walks up for CS. I'm just gonna look to deny her and poke her out and try to look for solo kills onto her. Right here, she goes for the melee creep, and I have that movement speed from the celerity and the Q, and I land a nice W. So that's another trade pattern that I think is very, very strong against Fiora. If you Q a minion and W the Fiora, and you can walk up to the Fiora with the W slow and get your second Q off, and the Fiora will be either forced to parry the second Q there, in which case you can use your E to follow up because they won't have their parry anymore, or if they don't parry it, then they're gonna just take a huge chunk. Unfortunately, my first back, I think I had about 950 gold rather than enough for a Sheen, so couldn't quite afford it. I just buy a double longsword instead. It'll probably work towards my Tiamat / Phage anyways. So right there, I had my second Q ready. I knew that even if I had a bad vital, I can just get that second Q and trade her. A lot of people get too scared when they have a bad vital against Fiora, but honestly, early game Fiora's vitals don't really hurt that much, and I think that people should be less afraid of Fiora's damage early. And right now, I'm doing a good job of harassing her, and so right there, this is the trade pattern where I mentioned. I Q a minion, and I W her, and I do the second Q. So that time she did parry it. I wasn't too inclined to go follow up with my E there, just because of the fact that she was pretty close to the tower. I didn't really know where the Sejuani was, so I didn't end up using my E, but that's completely fine since your Q's cooldown is much lower than Fiora's parry cooldown. There's no really that's not really a bad trade-off for the Camille at all. And that wraps up episode 3 of Camille matchup guide. The next episode will probably be on the Irelia matchup, which is another pretty tough early game matchup for Camille. But hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave the comments down below. Tell me what I can do to improve. Any other matchup guides you would like to see. And everyone, hope you guys have a nice day.